From Del Rio, Texas, Rob Wade and Robert Garza. Two guys who dive. This episode of Two Guys Who Dive, recorded live Saturday, 6 December 2014, episode 124. Hey buddy, can you spare some air? Well, welcome once again to another exciting episode of Two Guys Who Dive, and I'm your host, Rob Wade, and I hope that my co-host will be showing up shortly. He didn't let me know he had anything going on, so hopefully he's on his way. And we're trying out yet another update to the XSplit software that we have. So hopefully we won't run into any issues, unlike other technology I'm dealing with right now, which is interesting. Trying to get stuff tweeted out, and we're very social here at Casa de Wade. And so trying out a new piece of software on the Windows Phone, a feature that used to exist, and please excuse me, I feel a sneeze coming on, and that's always bad on air. A feature that used to exist when Windows Phone first came out was the ability using, they have live tiles, and one of the tiles that I used to rely on heavily was called the Me tile. And the beauty of the Me tile was that that's interesting, was that you could post from there across multiple social networks, which was pretty cool. And we've got a little interruption with one of our dogs here. Come here. Switch cameras here. Come here. There we go. Parents by Ronan. Say hi to everybody. Or not. And it looks like Greza wants to enter into the act here. You know, that's one of the downsides of having a home studio, is you have all sorts of interruptions, and I have my wife's not here to. Well, you're shying away from the microphone. My wife's not here to corral the kids, as it were. Oh, excuse me. Hopefully that's the only one I have today. So, as a matter of fact, she is out watching a local performance of the musical The Nutcracker. There goes number 2. So she's not able to kind of corral the dogs, but anyway. One of the features that I really love about Windows Phone is the social aspects of it, and the fact that from the Me tile you could select. I'll see if I can actually show you a little bit of what that's like. So you've got your various tiles here, and you see there's a picture of me in there, hence the Me tile. So if I click on that, then a number of one of the things you could do is post an update. And you could also check in, all from the Me tile, so you don't have to go out to separate apps. At least you didn't have to go out to separate apps to do this. So before the latest version of Windows Phone, the social aspects were much more integrated, which is brilliant. It was fantastic. And with the latest update, they broke that. They separated everything out. So the social aspects, they still exist, but they're not as tightly integrated. What they've done as sort of a backdoor or a poor man's version to deal with this is allow for third-party developers to write applications that kind of hook into that capability. So while you can't post an update across Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, etc., from the Me tile natively, if a third-party developer creates an app that does that and it can hook into this, then that kind of gives you at least partially way there. It's not nearly as slick, but and of course it totally depends on how good the developer is. Well, I've been looking for trying a number of third-party apps to add this feature back. When a lot of the time when I post something, it is across multiple networks. And oh, by the way, when I'm dealing with things like posting that we're getting ready to start the broadcast, I tend to post that not only across multiple social networks, but in the case of Facebook, across multiple pages, because I have, of course, my page that has, I have several hundred friends. Hard to believe, I know. But then I also have the Del Rio Dive Club page that I want to post it to. And I also have the Ceti Fox Productions page, because that is the main site through which all of our media aspects are introduced. So I've got those pages that I want to share to. So I needed a way to do that. Well, I've been trying out lately an app called Unishare, which, let me see if I can call that app and you can see what I'm talking about. So Unishare. Okay, so that's basically all there is to it. You've got your basic options there for settings and posting pictures, etc. And you just simply enter your status, and then you can post across multiple social networks. Let me see if I can bring up. So you can add, there's certain networks that they currently support. And the ones that I currently use are Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Path. But you can select to post on my timeline or on a page or either or. And if you select page, you can then select from all the pages that you have, which I have a number of pages that I actually either own or co-manage with other people, like our local theater group. So you could select from that. Well, they've been having some difficulties, I assume, with their servers, although it could be the app itself, because we just got an update to it yesterday. So I experienced it when I tried to tweet out, hey, we go live in 5 with 2 guys who dive. I received an error back and it wouldn't post to anything. So then thankfully, the developer built in a feature that if it runs into this kind of an error, that allows you to take the contents of the error and probably some behind the scenes back end stuff to send that to the developer so they can continue fixing or updating and tweaking the app. So I had to get out of the app, come back in and try it again, and it seemed to work with everything but Twitter. So we'll see what happens there. So that kind of frustrated me a little bit this evening. And as I said, we've got yet another update to our software and the XSplit software. They've been doing some updates to fix a number of things, but they still haven't fixed two of the main issues that I have with the software. One of which is the screen capturing capability. So, for instance, if I want to capture just a window on my other screen, because I have 2 screens here, then I can simply open up one of the scenes and add a element called screen capture. And when I click on that, you see basically the window. Well, the problem is the dogs are alighting, which means probably ScubaBob is finally shown up. If I click on this, I can actually, it brings up a reticle with red lines to outline an area. So a number of the ways that you can capture a screen is you can actually select a specific window, and it will automatically kind of snap to that window. Well, the problem we discovered is that if I select a window, an active window like the Bing window here, it will show you the frame, it will show you the title, and you might even see, in my case, the favorites bar. But all of the rest of the interior is completely white, which is very frustrating. So in order to get what you see here, which is the actual contents, I actually have to manually select, draw the rectangle just slightly around the edge of the window. So it seems to capture that. Now, obviously, if I were to move this window out of view, you could actually draw off the screen. Whereas if I had actually been able to select the window itself, it would follow my movement of the window or resizing it or whatever. If I resize this, then you'll see some of the background behind it, which is not what we want to have happen. So anyway, they still haven't fixed that issue. And then on top of that, another aspect that they haven't fixed is, although it's not as bad now, it seems, when you first start broadcasting, you start the application up and you see your scenes, etc. And then you go up to the top menu and select broadcast, and then the various sites that you may broadcast through, like Twitch TV, Justin TV, or in this case, we use Ustream. You select that, and then it negotiates your logon ID with Ustream, and then starts your broadcast, so you see what's on the screen. Well, unfortunately, what seems to happen every so often is you'll start a broadcast. Let's say you're testing something, or let's say we forgot to change something. We want to kill the broadcast and then go back into it. When you go back into it, it acts like you're broadcasting. You will see the red, the header of the title bar. You'll see it show that you're encoding and how many dropped frames, all this stuff. And it's all in red, so it's indicated like the on-air thing. And you can even bring up the task manager and look at the performance tab, Windows 8. You can look at the performance tab and highlight internet or Ethernet, and you'll see that you're pumping data out there. So in our case, we have a 5 megabit per second upload speed. And so we pretty much max that out in order to get you the 720p basic HD resolution. And so it'll show we're hovering at 4.5 megabits per second. But when you actually go to Ustream TV, it doesn't show that we're on air. So there's clearly a authentication issue here, because I have discovered that if I go into the settings for that broadcast and deauthorize the account, then reauthorize the account, fixes it immediately, and you're able to start broadcasting again. And oh, by the way, rebooting doesn't correct the issue. It seems to be something in the negotiation between the software and your account at Ustream or whatever. So they still haven't fixed that, but that is one reason why we have a machine off to the side here, a server off to the side here, that we observe what you see. So there is a delay in the way their service works. So what you're seeing right now actually has probably happened up to maybe 30 seconds ago in the studio here. So you're kind of behind the time, as it were. But we can see what's on this. We can see what you're seeing, so that we know if we're broadcasting or not. Because I can't trust the software to be accurate now because of the latest versions still haven't fixed that problem. So that's a little bit of making of the sausage, as they say. If you are watching live, and I'm looking in the chat room, and I see somebody that's in there, that might be John. If that's you, hi John, how's it going? Hope you're enjoying the show, or hope you're not too busy. He manages a orphanage, a home in Mexico. So, needless to say, it can be very demanding on his time. So that he gets any time to actually observe the broadcast is a bonus, I guess, for him. So, and a bonus for us if he gets to actually interact with us. Wow. Checking my settings here, and all right. So the title of the episode is "Buddy, Can You Spare Some Air?" Because we're going to be talking about backup or redundant air sources, and specifically a little bit of education discussion about the spare air. And I really wish ScubaBob were here tonight so we could talk about it. Don't have any movie reviews today because there's not been anything. This is, in any given year, it can be feast or famine when it comes to movies. And this year is definitely on the famine side. There's really not been a lot past October worth watching. The last thing that we saw, and it was awesome, was Interstellar. So if you haven't seen that, I highly recommend you do. I was exchanging tweets online with another tech guy who has his own podcast as well, though I think his is just an audio podcast. And here comes Grayza again. I guess the excitement outside has been dissipated. So anyway, and he's a big fan of NASA, and of course NASA has kind of stepped back into the scene and launched the Orion spacecraft, unmanned this, at least initially, so they can test some of the various features. Come here, Ronan. So they can test some of the features, especially, obviously, with something like this, it's some new technology. You don't necessarily want to throw people into it initially in case the re-entry is catastrophic. So, but they had a very successful launch, went 3,000 miles out on a high Earth orbit. So it went out beyond the orbit where the space station is, and then did the old school parachute landing in the water, which kind of disappoints me. I literally grew up with the shuttle, and I was very disappointed that the program was retired. I can remember very vividly when I was in junior high school in Joplin, Missouri. I remember we had one of the assemblies where somebody from NASA, can't remember the guy's name, came and showed us slides of talking about the shuttle, the shuttle program they were working on. So it was still in development. They were, talking about the test vehicle would be the Enterprise, and of course I was excited as a Star Trek fan. And so the gentleman talked about the program, showed what it was going to do and what their hopes were for it. So this was circa 1974, 75 maybe. So now fast forward, here we are in 2014, and now I've seen the entire initiation and through retirement of the shuttle program. It's kind of depressing for me because especially after seeing a movie like Interstellar, where that's, with the exception of the stupid robot, that's where I really romanticize our space program being able to go. I don't for a moment think we'll ever reach the level of like Star Trek, but to see ships like that where they go off in space and they come back and they land in their own control, not a free fall and splashing down where you have to scoop them up again with a ship. I mean, to me, that just goes back to the 60s, which I do remember those days as well. I'm that old. But nevertheless, this marks the first step for NASA to step back into the space program, which has, up to this point, after the post-shuttle era, has been relegated to the European Space Agency, us jumping on board, getting rides with the Soviets or with the Russians to the space station or private sector, which, I'm all for the private sector. Believe you me, if they get it right, I'm all for the private sector. However, that being said, there are things that only our government really can do with the funding that's necessary, because there's no, at that point, there is not a bottom line. There's not a monetary reward to it. It's more about the accomplishment and what we ultimately hope to get out of it that could breed commercial aspects of it. All of our space program has really resulted in a lot of commercial ventures from what we learned and developed for the space program. But so ultimately, they say, well, this is our first step toward Mars. Well, okay. There are a number of aspects, I guess, about the Orion spacecraft that are new and unique. So, notwithstanding the splashdown landing. And my friend on Twitter was talking about that, and of course, we both. He had not seen. I made remarks about how I was a little disappointed that we were going backward a little bit with our program, with the space program. And of course, he countered, because he's very much up on this, more up on this than I am. He countered with a number of things. Well, what about this? And it's got that and all these features it can do. And I said, that's great. But I really kind of thought, as a person who really loved the shuttle program, I really was hoping that our next step would be beyond the shuttle. It would be something that didn't just fly up, do low or Earth orbit and come back down, but would be able to go to the moon, go to Mars, come back and land. And I referred to aspects of the movie Interstellar, which, again, I think, to me, that's the #1 movie of the year. So, and he said he hadn't seen it. I said, I highly recommend you go see that. So, long story to simply say that's the last good movie I've seen. The next one we're kind of waiting for is Gods and Kings, which is a kind of a retelling, kind of a Ten Commandments reboot, telling of Moses and Pharaoh, etc. I'm hoping that it is with some poetic license. I'm hoping that it is pretty true to Scripture. I'll be very disappointed if it turns out to be another Noah, because I had high hopes for the movie Noah, and that was just a disgusting profaning of Scripture. So anybody who saw that, if you thought it was a good movie, I feel sorry for you. But aside from Gods and Kings, the only other movie that I'm anxiously, although with fear and trepidation, looking forward to is the movie adaptation of the Sondheim musical play Into the Woods. My wife and I are huge fans of the show, and in fact, I think the weekend that it premieres, I'll probably share with you all, and also post on Facebook to my theatrical buddies out there. I will share with you a couple of numbers that a fellow actor and I did from that show. Where earlier this year, we did a show called Showstoppers, which was basically a musical review of various songs from various plays and movies based on plays. And I've always wanted to do Into the Woods. It requires a huge cast, and every one of them is a major player, and every one of them should be uber talented. But we do. Ben Graff and I did a couple of numbers. One is the reprise of the other, and we played the two princes that are in the intertwined stories of these fairy tales of Cinderella and Snow White and Rapunzel and the baker and his wife and Jack and the Beanstalk and Little Red Riding Hood, and all of these characters are intertwined so that their stories work together to tell a bigger story in the play Into the Woods. And so, because we are huge fans of this play, we actually have a copy of the Broadway production of it. We're anxious to see the movie adaptation. However, having said that, the fact that a number of these characters are played by very well-known actors for whom we don't know a lot about their singing ability, or in some cases we do. I thought Meryl Streep was horrible in the movie adaptation of the musical play Mamma Mia. And unfortunately, she is playing the part of the Wicked Witch in Into the Woods. The part was played by Bernadette Peters on Broadway. She owned the role. And so I admit to a significant amount of bias. I just can't see anyone else playing the part but her. The wolves, there are two. Of course, the one with the three little pigs and the one with Little Red Riding Hood. And oh, by the way, there's been slight variations on Broadway done with it. Some had the three little pigs and hence had that wolf. Some did not. The version we have does not have the three little pigs or that wolf. It only has the one wolf with Little Red Riding Hood. The wolves are played also by the princes, the actors who play the princes, which is interesting. In the movie adaptation, they're not played. The wolf is played by Johnny Depp, and one of the princes I know is played by Chris Pine, the new Captain Kirk. I'm hoping that the actors all can pull off the characters as we've come to know and love them. Otherwise, I'm going to be very, very critical of the show when it comes out. But needless to say, that is the last show, the last movie that we're anxiously awaiting. Now, make sure that you catch our first episode of 2015, because that is the one where we break out the popcorn and sodas and all that fun stuff, and hopefully we'll get Troy McGonigal with us again as well, and we'll be doing our anticipated movies for 2015, so we'll be looking forward to that. So that episode will be pretty much all about that, because that takes a lot of time. So anyway, no movies. Tech news. Now, this is pretty cool. There's a company called, and I apologize if I'm totally massacring the name. It's Hammacher. It's Hammacher. I think it's a German name. Hammacher Schlemmer. They've got a unique thruster, a thruster harness for divers. This puppy costs, matter of fact, this puppy costs $31,000. I love this. I'm trying to fix some things here. $31,000, and it's battery powered. It actually has two 6-inch thrusters. And when I say thrusters, don't think of like spaceships, but think of thrusters like boats have, or those underwater submersible propulsion vehicles where you two handles and you just kind of fly underwater with those. It has a big fan. It's blade screw that is battery powered. That is what we're talking about. I'm trying to get pictures brought up here. I neglected to add them ahead of time. Here we go. So where's the save? Oh, there we go. Save the scene. Interesting. Is that gonna work? Let's hope so. So you wear like it's a harness. So you wear like a belt, but then it has straps to the side. I'm going to show you pictures in a second. And so there's a little 6-inch, it's not really little, but 6-inch thrusters, fans that push you through the water. Now, the thing is, the hitch to this, if you have $31,000 to spend on something like this, which is crazy to me, and it's cool because it can carry you up to 3.2 kilometers and at about 3.5 knots, which is a pretty good clip. And the battery is swappable underwater. So if you're, of course, again, you're carrying extra weight. So if you carry an extra battery, you can change it out underwater. Unlike like dive lights where you can't change those out underwater. But here's the thing. Hammacher Schlemmer will only sells this for recreational use to U.S. citizens for use in U.S. territorial waters. And due to the system's advanced design, anyone wishing to purchase the thruster harness must first obtain approval from the U.S. Department of State. Now, think about that. You have this really cool toy. If you've got $31,000 to spend, I'd rather spend that kind of money on a really cool rebreather system myself. But that it costs, that you have to get permission from the Department of State in order to use this. So here is what this thing looks like on. So this guy is wearing a rebreather system, and the reason you can tell that is because of the if you look in his mouth is the regulator, but it is a closed system. So he's got the intake hose and the exhaust hose that goes back into the rebreather system, so it processes, so it's without bubbles. But he's wearing the harness, so you see the battery, battery and control cables down, and it's strapped to the thighs. So basically where you aim your knees is how you're going to direct your thrust. So here is let me see if I can get this to change next. There we go. So this is what the thruster system looks like when you're not wearing it. So there's your battery pack, I guess, right there on the left side. So it kind of looks like one of those harnesses where if you are needing back support, something like that, that this is what you wear. And then the cables come down, where the little, and these look like little miniature versions of those handheld thrusters. And then you see the thigh straps here. So this is pretty cool, but I'm just imagining, and they said it's really quiet. I know that the handheld type aren't very quiet, so it's going to be interesting. I guess being only 6-inch screws, that these would be quieter, and hopefully the motor is quieter. So I guess with a rebreather system, you could kind of glide through over distance without getting exhausted pretty nicely with a system like this. So that's pretty cool. So for $31,000 and permission from the State Department, a recreational diver can purchase this setup. So that's pretty darn cool. Okay, so bringing us to the title of the topic, the title of the show for this week. Hey, buddy, can you spare some air? The I was reading in one of the websites that I like to read about latest scuba stuff, and I saw a article from a instructor, Melinda Herndon, who also is the director of eScuba Pty Limited. And she was sharing her decision to include the spare air by submersible systems in her toolbox. And this is basically how her story goes. So she said that, she says, I purchased a spare air directly after excuse me while I take a drink. After a much more experienced dive buddy had an out-of-air emergency and scared the heck out of me by grabbing my primary and bringing me to the surface too fast. Okay, I'll interrupt to comment about that. Okay, so she was the lesser experienced of the two divers. So her dive buddy, who was much more experienced, had a out-of-air emergency, or what they call OOA, and then grabbed her primary regulator from her mouth and then yanked her to the surface, because obviously he's gonna go to the surface. Now, we've talked about, Robert and I have talked about this before, when I'm teaching the scuba class, the basic class, and I'm explaining about all the skills, the individual skills that you need to learn, as far as how to clear your regulator, how that you should use the proper signals, low on air, out of air, give me your alternate air source, to the students, so that they know how to, if they run into a situation like that, they can signal to the person, and then their dive buddy hands them their alternate air source, not their primary, but their alternate. But I also explain that the reality is, if somebody's in a panic, their vision gets very myopic. So they see their problem-solving skills go right in the tank, go right down the tube, and their vision becomes tunnel. And so the only thing they can see is that you're breathing off of a regulator. They don't see where your alternate ear is in the triangle between your chin and your rib cage. They don't see that. And even though as part of your pre-dive safety check, you should be discussing that and talking about where do you keep your alternate air source, so that if I need to grab it from you and I'm not able to signal you ahead, I'm just going to go for it. I know where it's at. But no, what I tell students is, don't be surprised at all if what happens is your dive buddy or just another diver near you, if you're in a group, immediately just grabs your primary from you, because that's what panic is like. And that's one of the reasons why I am a big fan of the octo necklaces. They're just basically a rubber tube type thing with an opening where you can easily insert the mouthpiece of your alternate, and it keeps it right here. The beauty of that is, as I tell my students, if somebody comes at you and wants to take your regulator from you, they want to take your primary, don't wrestle with them for it. Just reach down and grab your alternate, because it's right there. And you, without even doing anything extra, you don't even have to take it out of the necklace. Just pop it in your mouth, and you now have control of, you've solved your first problem, which is, can I breathe? So given this experience, this is exactly the kind of thing that I've cautioned students about, so they should prepare for that event. Even though hopefully they would never get into that situation and their buddy would never get into that situation, the reality is something catastrophic can happen where you have a burst disc that goes, something fails where all of your air is jettisoned. So having your wits about you and being able to do the correct signals is important. But the reality is, panic is what it is, and somebody may just go right for your primary. So be ready for that. So continuing on her story, I was so freaked out that it took me half a minute. 30 seconds is a long time underwater. took me half a minute to even sort out getting my octo in hand. And of course, it was flooded. I was too green and anxious to remember to purge. So in other words, for the 30 seconds that she was in disbelief that her dive buddy, much more experienced dive buddy, yanked her primary out of her mouth, she then was fraught with, okay, what do I need to do? Oh, yes, I have my alternate, so I'll use my alternate, even though my buddy should have been signaling so I could give him or her the alternate. So now she's fumbled to get her alternate, which would have been really easy if you had the necklace. You just pop it in your mouth. And then, of course, she's hopefully been trailing the little trail of bubbles so she's not actually holding her breath. Because anytime the regulator's out of your mouth, you should never hold your breath completely. She didn't have the immediate presence of mind. Probably, she said she was green and anxious. Again, the skills you practice on a regular basis are the ones that are going to be immediately available to you at the time that a crisis happens. So she finally got the regulator in her mouth, and then she didn't purge it. So the first breath, her first reaction is, I've got the regulator in my mouth. I'm taking a breath. Well, there's water in there. So she's, of course, coughing up water because she didn't purge it correctly. So that was a lot of fun. And again, you can cough through your regulator. It doesn't matter. You can throw up through you can vomit through your regulator. It works. So anyway, so she goes on to say that the spare air by Submersible Systems was recommended to me by a friend whose life had been saved by that very thing after a catastrophic equipment failure. It's hard to imagine a more meaningful bit of safety equipment than the spare air in any scuba toolbox. So we've talked about the spare air. I have one, my wife has one, and I dive with it all the time. I always have it available. Now, unfortunately, the opinions of this device, this tool, this mechanism, on a lot of your blogs, a lot of your comment boards aren't all that favorable, but it's for what I consider to be unreasonable reasons. One site that is very, very popular for people to go to ask questions and to get comments on things is ScubaBoard.com. And they actually ran a poll on it, and there seems to be an overwhelming opinion against the spare air devices. Most of the people providing the opinion are saying, just get a pony bottle. That's what you really should have. Get a 30 cubic foot pony bottle and be done with it. That their opinion of the spare air is that that's just a marketing thing, that it creates a false sense of security, and that it just enables you to run out of air twice on the same dive. Now, I get angry at things like that because that tells me that these experienced divers are not considering the points where something like this is valuable. It appears that those with hundreds or even thousands of dives typically go beyond the normal recreational diving and argue that fumbling with a spare air is useless and just executing a controlled emergency swimming ascent is what you should be doing. The thing is, you can't do a CISA at 90 feet. And in fact, I would argue that even though we teach this in the course and the students have to successfully complete it, I would venture a guess that almost all divers neglect to practice a CISA ever again. And again, as I said before, if you do not practice the skills that you learned on a regular basis, then they're not going to be there for you when you actually need them. You know, that you need to get them to where they're automatic. That's why I recommend you clear your mask. You flood and clear your mask on a regular basis. Keep used to that. Keep yourself exercised in the muscle memory of that. Clearing your regulator, recovering it, throw it aside and recovering it. A number of situations can have it yanked out of your mouth, like another diver, for instance. The same thing is true with an alternate air source. If you don't practice switching even between your primary and your alternate air source, then you're going to get into the same kind of problem that she had. She was a green diver, and she neglected to purge the regulator when she put her alternate in because her buddy had taken her primary. Well, the alternate is just as good as the primary, but the same process follows. If you're switching regulators, you've got to clear the water out. Again, the skills that you don't practice are going to fail you when you need them. One person who generally agreed that having a pony bottle if you're focusing on redundancy of equipment, a real pony bottle is preferred. Yeah, I agree. But even he said that if we're really talking about true redundancy, then a 30 cubic foot pony bottle is irresponsible as well. In other words, it's not the same size bottle that you were using. So anything less than what you were diving with could be considered irresponsible, because it comes down to what have you practiced with? What do you use on a regular basis? When you have a pony bottle, you're going to have a second cylinder of 19 cubic feet, 30 cubic feet, whatever, and it's going to have its own regulator, primary and alternate stage and second stage, and those are going to be attached somewhere. So you've got to practice using even that, because you're going to have to pull from, let's say you have catastrophic failure on your main system. So that means your primary and your octo are not going to work, and you have to switch to your redundant pony bottle. Well, where's the regulator for that? You can get into a lot of trouble if you don't practice with that. And if it's anything less than what you had in your primary tank as far as capacity, as far as volume, then you could still have a false sense of security. The thing is, if you want a redundant system, get something as large as you can. More air is better, okay? But here's the thing. You've got anything that you have in your equipment, your toolbox, is all about risk management. You are assessing the risk of something happening and whether or not you're equipped to deal with that thing. If you go without any kind of a spare air, then your risk assessment is based on the following. It's based on whether or not you practice all of your self-rescue skills, how to clear your mask, how to recover your regulator and clear it, how to switch to your alternate. You're also banking on the same for your buddy, and that your buddy is going to remain close enough to you so that he or she is your redundant system. So the fact is, I see John's in the room. He missed his alarm. Hate it when that happens, John, when you miss your alarm. I do that a lot. Redundancy and alarms is important too. So if you're banking on your buddy also having all the wherewithal and practiced up on his or her skills, then that's your second air supply, separate from yours. But again, that relies on whether or not your buddy's got it all together. As we were talking about in Melinda Herndon's experience, she was diving with a much more experienced dive buddy who had an out-of-air situation, and he panicked, or at least near panicked. He grabbed her primary rather than signaling, "I'm out of air, give me your alternate." He just grabbed for her primary. So you've got to factor all of those kinds of things in when you're trying to do your risk assessment. Okay, so let's say you've got your act together and your equipment's good. Your buddy's got his or her act together and all his or her gear is good. And you're diving along and you have catastrophic failure. Well, now you've got to hope that your buddy was staying close enough to you to be of any kind of assistance. Because let's say you're 90 feet down and your buddy has seen something that he or she wants to take a picture of and has ducked behind a rock or followed it off somewhere. And you weren't watching, you were watching some other thing that all the other divers in the group were watching. And you turn around and where's your dive buddy, and suddenly all of you have a burst disc failure and all of your air is jettisoned and you're trying to look for something to breathe. Well, what do? Well, you have mere seconds to decide how you're going to escape. Now, unfortunately, most of these know-it-alls in scuba board who were trash talking a spare air were saying, well, I can free ascent to the surface and live to dive another day. I'm like, well, if you've got that many dives under your belt and you've practiced free ascent from 90 feet and you're able to make it, okay, great. But most divers don't practice those kinds of things. They're at least, if they're going to get air, they've bought themselves some time to solve the next problem. If I'm at 90 feet with a diver and I have a catastrophic failure and they're out of reach for me to do, so where I would normally do a CISA, which when we teach the controlled emergency swimming ascent, we teach that as in the case of you're at 30 feet or shallower and your buddy is greater than 30 feet away from you, then you do the controlled emergency swimming ascent. If your buddy is closer than 30 feet, then you swim for them. But the CISA does not work. In most cases, for most people, is not going to work at deeper than 30 feet. Most people are not going to have the presence of mind and be calm enough to handle anything more than that, if even that, okay? So if you have a redundant air supply that buys you some time to make a better choice, then what is the failure there? If you practice it. As I was saying earlier, the skills that you practice are going to be the ones that are going to be immediately available to you at the time that you have some sort of a failure. So I don't care what size pony bottle you carry. If you don't practice with it, it's useless to you anyway. There have been stories of people who have drowned, suffered embolism, and had air. So they had a situation, they panicked, and even though they had air, they did stupid things like spit the regulator out of their mouth or come up too fast or do any number of things, but where they had air, if they realized, focused on the fact that they had air, they had time to negotiate the next most critical issue of whatever was happening. The thing is, if you practice nothing, then the automatic response. If you practice none of your skills, practice with none of your tools, none of your redundant supplies. If you don't practice with whatever you have, then you have nothing going for you. So what's going to happen? You're going to, in a catastrophic failure, you are going to hold your breath and you're going to Polaris to the surface and you're likely going to have an air embolism, barotrauma, or all of the above, and you will die. It's that simple because you don't practice those things. Now, I like the spare air. I've got one. I'm going to show it to you. Let's see if I can back the camera out just a little bit. Maybe. There we go. All right. So, matter of fact, let me drop the lower third to make it a little bit easier for you to see. All right. So you're looking just over the top of my screen. So this is the spare air. This is a 3 cubic foot. Now I dive with a very common 80 cubic foot tank. My wife dives with a 63 cubic foot tank. This is 3 cubic feet. That's not a lot of air. The deeper, and remember, the deeper you go, the more air you're going to go through because it takes more to fill your lungs. But it is a totally self-contained system. So it's got a nice little harness. I've got little D-rings on it, so it's easy to clip to my rig. It's got a lanyard to it, so you can clip to a D-ring on your BC, so that even out of the harness, if you accidentally let go of it, it's at least going to trail behind you. So all you have to do is Velcro. You just take it out. It's got a little cover for the mouthpiece. Pull it right out. So this is the self-contained system. All right. So it's got its own built-in regulator. See, it's got its mouthpiece, and it's got the filler tube. You unscrew this, and there's an adapter that you attach to your tank, and you can fill it up off of your tank. And then it's got the basic model has a little what I call a nipple gauge that tells you if it's full. And so when you've filled up the tank, this little button pushes out and to flush. I've actually got a gauge. It's actually you can replace that and put a gauge on it, so it actually shows me the amount of pressure. And again, you fill this to 3,000 psi. It's just only got 3 cubic feet of air in it. So and it's the purge right there on the top. So again, self-contained. You simply put it in your mouth and breathe off of it. Piece of cake. Now, the thing is, because it's only 3 cubic feet of air, that doesn't buy you a lot of time. Again, the deeper you go, the less air, the less time it buys you. So it's important to practice with this. And I do regularly. I dive with it regularly, and I practice with it. Here's the thing. Worst case scenario. Oh no, our dogs are messing with the camera, so I think I'll be using just this camera for the rest of the episode. Let me adjust my camera back in, zoom back in, and there we go. Goodness. Okay. So I practice with this spare air regularly. If you are at the max of recreational dive limit, then you're not going to be able to do controlled emergency swimming ascent from that depth. You simply will not have enough air to do the ah sound. And here's the reality of it. Most cases, you're not going to discover that you've got an out of air situation till you try to take a breath and you can't get a full breath. So you won't necessarily have a full breath to even do a CESA at 30 feet. Okay? So it's important to remember that you've got to get some air somewhere. So let's say I have a catastrophic failure. I have an OOA at 90 feet. I have practiced doing staged controlled emergency swimming ascents with this, which means I take a breath, and I've got it in my mouth. I take a breath, and I do the ah sound as far as I can. Then I take another breath, and I continue doing the ah sound as far as I can. And I continue. I have plenty of air left in that, going all the way from the recreational limit, going to the surface, by just simply keeping my wits about me and doing a controlled emergency swimming ascent all the way to the surface. It's not meant, and this is where I think a lot of these naysayers in Scuba Board and a number of people who have thousands of dives underneath them, they're assuming that this should be a kind of a device that you just hand a novice and say, here you go, here's your security blanket. No. Like any other tool that you have, you've absolutely got to practice with it. So whether it's a pony bottle, whether it's just practicing, whether it's diving with your buddy who is your third air source, or your redundant air source, or a spare air, you practice using it in the kind of scenarios that you would most typically be. If you are diving in a wreck and you've not been trained to, and you're expecting a spare air to be your bailout bottle, bad decision. Dive within your limits and your training and the tools that you have. I have no problem at all recommending the spare air to somebody who understands how they're going to learn to use it. And it simply is a way to get you from where you're at to the surface or a buddy. If I have a catastrophic failure and it's going to be, there's no way I could do a CISA to get me to my buddy because if for some stupid reason there's too much distance between us, but it's closer to them or another diver in the group than the surface, the spare air is my way to get there. Okay? All right, the alternate, of course, as I said, the worst case scenario is if there's nowhere to be found, nobody to be found, no dive buddy to be found, and I have catastrophic failure, I'm going straight to the surface. I'm not lingering. I sometimes think that's what these people commenting and trashing the spare air are concerned about. Either a novice is using it, inexperienced, and not going to be fumbling for it. There is no fumbling. It's right there. It's easy to access if you attach it to your BC correctly. It's as easy to access as your Octo. So the other thing I think they seem to believe is that people would be using it to take a leisurely tag to their dive. Oh, I ran out of air, or I had a catastrophic failure. Oh, well, I've got my pony bottle, my spare air, so I'm just going to leisurely finish out my dive and maybe cut it a little bit short. No. That is a true bailout bottle. That is to get you to the surface the safest way possible. And that's all it's meant for. They don't market it as you can finish out your dive with it. They don't market it for anything else other than it is a bailout bottle. It's that simple. But you've got to practice with it. You've got to use it in the situation, the scenario that would most likely drive you to use that, which would be all of my air suddenly jettisoned, and my dive buddy is nowhere to be found, and I can't get to them. That's where the spare air comes into play. And again, it's a very easy, for $200, and you can get smaller versions, but I don't recommend the smaller versions because, to me, if you're going to be diving at all, more air is better. If you can afford a full pony bottle, 20 cubic foot, 30 cubic feet, and the regulators, that go with that, and you don't mind all that extra weight, because there's really no weight to speak of with the spare air. If you are okay with that, then by all means, that is where you should go. Like I said, more air is better. But even with that, practice using it. Switch to it. Put yourself in a situation where you've got some time and you say, okay, I'm going to run the scenario. I've taken a breath and realized all my air is gone. I didn't realize it leaked out the back and I wasn't paying attention to my gauge. Or suddenly the burst disc blew and all of the air is escaping out. You've got mere seconds to grab, pull the regulator from your pony bottle, put it in your mouth, clear it, and start breathing of it, and then make sure there's no other issues, and then you begin your surface. Anytime you have to go off of your primary system, that's your reason to abort the dive. It's that simple. If anything is forcing you to switch to your buddy's air or your redundant system, whether it's spare air or pony bottle, that is immediately the end of your dive. If you've got the air, you work your way to try and do your safety stop. On a spare air, you're not going to do your safety stop unless you happen to be shallow. You're not going to do it. So you're coming with a spare air, you're coming straight to the surface. Now, obviously, if you did a deep dive and you had to use your spare air to get to the surface, you're going to not be diving the rest of the day. And you need to be watching yourself for any signs of decompression sickness, because there's a reason why from a deep dive we do make it a rule that you do a safety stop, because it's prudent to do so. But I'd rather be on the surface and just be watching safely and be watching for any signs of DCS than potentially drowning. So the bottom line is don't let snobbish people who have got insane amounts of diving under their belt and have always been diving with pony bottles or twin tanks and all this garbage. Don't let them scare you away from making a prudent purchase that is just an additional bit of safety for you. It's an additional tool in your toolbox, okay? If you, like I said, more air is better. If you can afford a pony bottle and a second regulator to go with that, by all means, go for that. I plan on doing that. I actually want a pony bottle for just such a reason, for self-assisted or for self-reliant diving. But I always dive with my spare air. It's absolutely a worthwhile purchase if you plan to dive with it regularly and practice using it. I mean, it's so easy to refill it off of your primary tank anyway. So if you get one of these, or if you get a pony bottle, practice using it. Practice the scenarios so the skills are there. Okay? So that is my recommendation. It's a worthwhile product for a couple $100. Best safety feature for an affordable budget if you plan to know how to use it. All right, we're running a little bit long, and ScubaBob never did show up and never texted me, so I don't know what the deal is. I'll have to text him afterward. Just one little last thing, and this would have been cool if he'd been here because we're both Star Trek fans. I use Bing for my search tool. I hate Google. I hate all things Google. And let me see if that full shot's working at all. Well, they didn't bump it too bad. And on the bottom, matter of fact, let me show you a screen region. On the bottom, they have a number of different things, top news, and some links for some different stories. And some of those are tailored based on what Bing learns about you. And in my case, it knows that I like Star Trek. And so there was a link to a website that had some videos, wired.com as a matter of fact, talking about a series I hadn't heard of called Star Trek Continues. And it's a fan-based series, of which they only have 3 episodes so far. But the guy you see here playing Captain Kirk, he's the executive producer and starring in it. He's basically funding the whole thing. And of course, they take donations too, so it's sort of crowdfunded too. But if you watch I haven't watched the episodes yet, but I've watched the videos on Wired where they show clips and kind of the behind the scenes. And what's amazing is this guy and the crew, the cast and crew, they have been meticulous in making this series literally look like it picked up from where the original series left off. So they literally designed the entire set exactly to the specs of the original Desilu studios, down to every detail. As a matter of fact, if you watch the various videos talking about where they kind of do the behind the scenes, they show you how they duplicated all of the things down to measurements, the lighting and everything. But of course, they've been able to take advantage of more updated CGI for the ships, which is essentially what CBS did when they remastered the entire series. But it's amazing all the details that they stayed tight with. In fact, he goes at length in one of the videos talking about the episode from the original series, Mirror Mirror. They have an episode, the 3rd episode, as a matter of fact, of Star Trek Continues, literally picks up where that episode left off. You know, if for those who are Star Trek aficionados and you're familiar with how the ending of Mirror Mirror was, where Kirk had figured out, or Kirk and Scotty and had figured out how to get back to their world, their prime, their prime universe. He was convincing Spock from the mirror universe, to take command of the ship and take a chance on moving their empire towards something that's more Federation-like. And so what this episode report, I haven't seen it yet, but I'm anxious to see it. What they did was literally they took where it left off, where after they switch and you see what's going on back on the normal Enterprise, well, they carry it on for the mirrored universe. So the episode goes on to see, well, what the malicious Kirk is dealing with when he comes back and finds that Spock is probably going to mutiny. So I'm anxious to see how that. And they worked all the lighting. I mean, he talks at length about how the mirror episode, and I never realized this, and I'll have to watch it now to see, so I can get this, so I can understand what he's talking about. But he said the lighting for that episode was different from all the other episodes. It was much darker, had a lot of little shading and striping of lights, etc. And so they had to duplicate that as well for their episode that continues on from that episode on what happens in the mirrored universe. So that a guy, and what's interesting, they show clips of this guy. What is his name? Vic Mignogna, or however you pronounce this. Mignogna. He shows some little clips of him as a kid after he saw the original Star Trek episodes. He actually got some friends together, and they did the uniforms and the communicators and the phasers and everything, and they would film their own little series, their own little episodes as kids. It's kind of cute to see that. And so here he's literally getting to grow up and do for real what he's always wanted to do. Now, because this is classified as a fan series or fan movie, they don't run afoul of the copyrights. I mean, they give legal due to CBS, to Universal, and all the other folks, that Desilu, etc. They give all that their proper credits, but because they're not making any money off of this, literally he's funding this with crowdsourcing. He's able to put these out there. So definitely would, if you're a Star Trek fan and you're kind of curious, this might be something to check out. I mean, the acting is not all that great. Just from the clips I've seen, some of them are better than others. But you can't argue the production values. The production values of this, at least these 3 episodes, is pretty spectacular because they were so meticulous about everything that they did with it. So that's so just look for StarTrekContinues.com, and then you can see all the details there. Be interested to see what your opinions are of it. You can share that with us on the episode after we upload this episode to YouTube, and share your thoughts about that, I guess. So, all right. So that was something completely different. So let's hit some administrative before we close things out. Next Dive Club meeting is January 15th at 7 p.m. at Rudy's Restaurant. Again, we're not going to have one in December because there's so many things going on. Our Christian band, Living Water Sound, has got some gigs coming up. We're going to be doing as a matter of fact, on the 14th of December, we're going to be doing a Christmas concert at Grace Community Church. So if you happen to be in the area, definitely would like to have you come out and check that out. And we also may be having some gigs at the mall also with Christmas music. So we'll see how that goes. So, but with so many things going on at this time of the year, it just is really impractical to have a club meeting. So 15 January, 7 p.m. at Rudy's Restaurant. And if you haven't seen on our website or the Facebook page, I've got the Here's the dive classes listed for. These are basic classes, but of course the advanced and further are by request. I just need to get enough people to make a class happen. So the basic classes, which are in higher demand, I've got lined up for next year are 23rd through the 26th of April, 28th through the 31st of May, 25th through the 28th of June, 23rd through the 26th of July, 27th through the 30th of August, and the 24th through the 27th of September. And as always, you can sign up for any of those as early as you like, because I will send you your study materials, self-study materials, so you can get a start on them. But if you're going for any particular month, make sure that you sign up no later than the first week of that month, because it does take a little bit of time to get your student materials received and then to you, because I keep my costs down by not having a stockpile of stuff here. I have the things that I teach with, but I don't have, since I never know what size my classes are going to be, I'm not going to, it's not financially prudent to stockpile student materials. So if you want to take one of these classes, make sure you sign up not later than the first week of the month of the class that you want, but you can sign up as early before that as you'd like to. If you need air fills, we generally send folks to the Broke Mill RV Park because Mike McCarson has the big Cascade system out there. All you need to do is call him ahead of time so he knows you're coming. Just give him a buzz at 830-719-2935. I do have my own compressor, and so and I do offer for my students a free full year of free air fills. So if you happen to get your own tanks, which I highly recommend you get your own gear as soon as you get certified, or before, get your gear. You're more likely to dive. It's just simply a fact. You're more likely to dive if you've got your own gear. So, but if you've got your own tank and you are a student of mine, I will fill your tank free for a year. Also, if you live in the Del Rio area and you have any spare time, you can donate. A Pet's Wish, which is the local pet rescue here in Del Rio, really desperately needs your help. Tara and I volunteer every Monday night, and it's a lot of work, but it'd be a lot less work if we had more volunteers working more frequently and more consistently. It's that simple. Many hands make work light, as the scripture says. And so if you have a hankering to help out these poor animals, and they really they need love and attention. They need feeding and watering. They need cages cleaned. Please look them up on Facebook. Look them up in the phone book. A Pet's Wish really could use your help as volunteer. Also, if you'd like to get in touch with us, you can find out what's going on in the big picture, and also see like videos of latest trips that we've done, etc. Just check us out on delriodiveclub.com, or to more immediately interact with things that are going on, go to our Facebook page. Just look for Del Rio Dive Club, or you can send us a message via Skype. Just send it to TGWD. And then, of course, if you'd like to send me email, for instance, guess what? You can send it right here. Just send it to robert.wade@cetifox.net. Or if you'd like to follow me on Twitter, and I warn you, I'm politically proliferate. So I'm very busy, very busy posting on Twitter. But if you'd like to follow me, just check me out at Robert CFP, stands for Ceti Fox Productions. Love to interact with you. If you follow me, I will follow you. So it's that simple. I hope that tonight's episode was of value to you. Hopefully it shared some good information about redundant air systems, and maybe dispelled some concerns or worries that other people may have thrown at you if you were interested in the spare air. Again, it's not for everybody, and no redundant system is of any value to you if you don't practice with it. Practice with everything that you have. Practice every skill that you have. I mean, go right down the list of all the things that you learned in your class, and I cannot urge you enough to practice each one of those things. Getting out of your equipment and getting back into it. I can almost guarantee you that nobody practices that outside of having learned it in the class. And yet, of course, I do it every time I teach the class. And I have actually had an instance in real world diving where I needed to get out of my rig in order to cut free some fishing line that was tangled up in my rig. So, and guess what? I had to have my knife with me and my dive shears. So use the tools, practice the tools. If you're interested in a spare air, get the largest one, the 3 cubic foot. $200 is so worth it. If you can afford a full pony bottle and you want to lug that thing around with and its own regulator, by all means get it. I'm planning on doing that. But in the meantime, I have no qualms about diving with my spare air. So again, I hope this was of value to you. John, I appreciate you jumping in the chat room. Hope you enjoyed it. And hopefully get to dive with you sometime. It's getting pretty cold out there. It's about 58 degrees in the water. Actually, it's probably colder than that now. If not, we'll be looking forward to the spring when things start to warm up. And again, if you have ideas, comments, questions, suggestions, join us live in the chat room. As you watch, you can interact. Or you can comment on our episodes as we upload them. Please subscribe to our page. Subscribe to the channel so you can be updated when these get uploaded and also have your opportunities to comment. So again, always love to hear your comments and your participation. And so again, unfortunately, ScubaBob was not here. I'll have to find out what in the world happened to him. And so barring any unforeseen circumstances, hopefully we'll see you next weekend on another exciting episode of Two Guys Who Dive. See ya.